Welcome to the third and final episode of Capcom and the Sega Dreamcast. In this episode, we will be looking at the final releases from Capcom for Sega's 6th generation machine. Many of these games were Japanese exclusive and released nowhere else in the world. The level of quality remains consistent yet again, with the vast majority of these titles turning out quite solid and none of them qualifying as a bad experience in my eyes. Fighting games of course make a big showing here, but Capcom kept some variety in the group with some arena-based action representation, a couple of shoot-em-ups, a puzzle game, and even a version of Resident Evil most people don't know about. It's been a great ride so far, so let's wrap it up strong with Capcom and the Sega Dreamcast Part 3. In December of 2000, Capcom released a sequel to the popular PlayStation 3D fighter Rival Schools called Project Justice. This new entry received a bunch of changes to the core fighting setup of that first game. Now we have 3-on-3 fights, a modified vigor system, new team-up moves, as well as team counters. You can choose a story-based mode that plays out each high school's part in the happenings, or you can choose a free select mode and mix and match teams just to fight it out. This is one hell of a good game. It's bursting at the seams with personality, and you just have to love its crazy storyline about competing high schools under siege from a ninja assassin plot to rule Japan. The visuals are gorgeous and each fight takes place across varied locations like sports parks, high school courtyards, and theme parks. The gameplay is team-based and features heavy reliance on juggle combos and special moves. Some of these specials are meant for damage, but you can also heal your team and power up your vigor bars with some characters. It all makes for a great and varied experience, and one of the Dreamcast's most approachable 3D fighters. It was based on the Naomi arcade version that was released that same year, and has no other home port to enjoy. That makes this a must-own for the Dreamcast and easily in its top 5 better fighting games. Also in December of 2000, we received the Seikiou developed Cannon Spike from Capcom. Based on the Naomi arcade game from earlier in the year, this is perhaps the company's strangest release on the platform. It takes a bunch of different characters from various franchises and mixes them up in a top-down shoot-em-up. You move around on what amounts to rocket-powered skates and can shoot in any direction. You have special attacks to aid you, as well as a close-up melee maneuver if you need it. The visuals, while not mind-blowing, are still really good. Everything runs smoothly and the characters are well detailed. The music fits the action and is actually quite decent. The real draw here is of course its characters and multiplayer. Running around and blasting everything as Mega Man with a friend is great fun. My lone complaint centers on the extremely short nature of the stages and how disjointed everything feels. Drop in, blast away for 2 minutes, down a boss, and boom, you're off to a new area. The variety is nice, but it isn't seamless at all. Despite that, Cannon Spike is a nice playing, nice looking, and nice sounding shooter that breaks from the other stuff we saw from Capcom. That alone wins it some points, and my recommendation to give it a try. Available that December as well was Super Street Fighter 2X for matching service. This was offered online through Sega Direct exclusively, and features network multiplayer on Capcom's dedicated service. It was also exclusive to Japan and not released in any other territory. The quality of this port is solid, particularly its audio and visual presentation. It adds a few new features such as additional turbo options and a special options that can add old bonus stages from the previous versions of the game. The biggest issue that this one has is the rarity of it. Because it was only available through Sega's Dreamcast online store, there is not a lot of them out there. It sells for an absolute fortune, and with much cheaper options out there, it makes this one tough to recommend.
You win!
Capcom's first release in 2001 came in January with the Takumi Corporation developed Giga 2. Again, we get a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up that is as hard as they come. Like the first game, I had not played this in quite some time, and again it just tore me to shreds. Even on the easier settings, this game just floods the screen with so much stuff you barely have any places to survive. That means a lot of playing to get used to things, but luckily there are some great additions here to keep things fun. First, the Naomi-powered arcade version was translated here perfectly, now with incredible looking 3D backdrops. They also wanted to make things special, and you can play this in 4-player simultaneous co-op multiplayer. Back are the varied shooting styles of its different ships, and there are even more that you can unlock. The US version of this was sold at the budget price of merely $20, an absolute steal considering that the game was such a great experience. Unfortunately, a European version never made it out, and the rarity of the US version means it's expensive. I recommend going after the Japanese version if you want a physical copy. March of 2001 gave us Biohazard Code Veronica Complete Edition. This Japanese exclusive would see a number of additions and changes to the original game. The battle game is open from the beginning now, a first-person mode that allows you to play through the eyes of characters like Claire, Chris, and Wesker. There's a bunch of new story scenes with Wesker, and Leonardo DiCaprio is back with a new hairstyle. There is also a new easy mode added to the game that gives you plenty of ammo and weapons to cruise through to the end. This was released on other systems as Resident Evil Code Veronica X, and while most of the text is in Japanese, the story is completely in spoken English. It's a nice one to have to round out the collection, and one most people have no clue existed.
Yes, he can. I'm sure of it.
No way. He won't come. You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Believe me, I know.
What was that all about?
In June of 2001, Capcom released an update to Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000, now with the added Pro moniker. Since the first game was so popular in both its Naomi and Dreamcast releases, Capcom wanted to add some much requested balance tweaks to the game to bring it more in line with their original vision. This includes toning down overpowered fighters and boosting some of the low tier guys. We also got 2 new characters added, one Capcom character in Dan and one SNK character in Joe from Fatal Fury. All of the hidden guys from the original are now unlocked as well. Unfortunately, this was only released in Japan for the Dreamcast, though it did get a second budget run the following year. It's still cheap and very much worth picking up. Capcom released Super Puzzle Fighter 2X for matching service in July of 2001, only in Japan. Originally showing up on the CPS2 arcade system, this is a solid representation of that original. You get the same great gem-breaking action of the arcade, as well as a few new modes to choose from. The X mode is the classic game. Form gems and break them down to send them over to your opponent's side of the screen. The Y mode changes up the way the gems break, and now plays just like columns by matching 3 or more in a row. The Z mode is an even bigger change, this time having the gems come completely the other direction and you rotating 4 at a time instead of just 2. Of course, the big deal here was the addition of network multiplayer, a first for the game. If you have the Saturn version, I can't say you need to worry about this one too much, but it's still a fun addition to the Dreamcast library. Also in July of 2001, Capcom was back to the experimental cauldron and came up with the truly bizarre heavy Metal Geomatrix. This 4-player Naomi port has a setup similar to their earlier Spawn title, basically an arena fighter filled with guns and melee weapons. This time Capcom decided to open the environments up a bit, giving you plenty of area to fight to the death in. Since it sports the heavy metal license, you get a great mix of tunes here, which does include some notable work from Megadeth. I remember game publications at the time just slaughtering this in reviews. People seemed to hate the gameplay, but I always felt that like Spawn before it, its strengths lied in its multiplayer fun factor. Get a few friends together, crank up the music, and there is definitely a game here worth playing. The gameplay and camera do take some getting used to, and the graphics take a pretty major hit in multiplayer. Weirdly, this reminds me of Sega's Virtual On at times. From the dashes to the arenas, it's a deja vu I can't deny. If you were one of the ones that found fun in Spawn, I really do recommend a look here. It feels different, but caters to the same audience with its potential. In September of 2001, we received a sequel to Capcom vs SNK called Millionaire Fighting 2001. It was again a Naomi arcade port, and since I really enjoyed the first game so much, I was very much looking forward to playing its sequel. Capcom wasn't happy with just adding a few characters and calling it a day, and instead really mixed things up here. Back is the 6-button interface of their previous Versus games, and there are now 6 different grooves to choose from, with each corresponding to different systems found in other Capcom and SNK fighters. You also get the ability to play through the game in different ways. You can choose to stick to the ratio match that is similar to the previous game, or go at it with a straight 3-on-3 match that strips away the limitations. Finally, you can choose to play a simple 1-on-1 match like a standard Street Fighter game. There are loads of characters here to choose from. Unfortunately, there are still some holdovers that look out of place, particularly on the Capcom side of things. Much of this is mitigated by the incredible backgrounds. Capcom chose to redo this area of the first game and added 3D polygon elements similar to Marvel vs. Capcom 2. A few of these stages are my favorite backgrounds in any fighting game. I love the stage that has the rally track just behind you. Cars rounding turns and jumping over your fight area are a real visual showcase. Like many of these Capcom fighters, this was compatible with the matching service in Japan, and featured crossplay with the PlayStation 2 version of the game. Due to its late release, this remained a Japanese exclusive for the Dreamcast, and was never released in North America or Europe. Capcom's final Dreamcast game would come in April of 2002 in the form of the Japanese exclusive Mobile Suit Gundam Federation vs. Zeon, or the full Japanese title you see at the bottom of the screen there. This comprises both Naomi arcade ports of the original and its deluxe edition upgrade. Choose your side, a mech, and off you go. Here you will do battle with other vehicles and mechs in open arenas with various terrain types. Sometimes it's a rocky canyon, sometimes even water, and you'll need to deal with these challenges to stay alive. The gameplay is comprised of both melee and distance weapon combat, and you have jump jets to get you into and out of compromising situations. The best way I can describe this is kind of like a slower, more deliberate version of Sega's mech titles. Many of the strategies are the same. You can use cover to keep enemies' attacks off of you, you have distance weapons to snipe enemies, and once up close, you can bring the pain Samurai Showdown style. The visuals are smooth and well detailed, and massive open stages provide ample real estate for you to move around in. Frankly, this is one of the Dreamcast's hidden gems in my opinion. While its story mode is in Japanese, the arcade mode is easy to play and the controls are fairly intuitive. Capcom also made this compatible with its matching service, and again included cross-platform play with the PlayStation 2 version. It comes on 2 discs, and if you are a fan of mecha, I really do recommend giving it a try. Capcom also released a few adventure and RPG games for the Dreamcast in Japan. The most notable of these were the Eldorado Gate series of games. These budget-priced mini-adventures featured nice hand-drawn art and had a battle system quite a bit like the classic Phantasy Star games. It has weapon and item upgrades and multiple characters to play as. There were 7 releases in the series spanning a full year from late 2000 to late 2001. It was Japanese exclusive and remains so to this very day.
Enemies have appeared.
Capcom also released Bounty Hunter Sera for the Dreamcast. This adventure novel features a play-along story where you choose how things proceed. It's set in Tokyo well into the future, and is mostly comprised of still images set to dramatic music. It's heavily text-based and very hard to follow if you don't read the language. Capcom also had a board game for the Dreamcast called Gaia Master Kessen. It's a port of the Japanese PlayStation game that features turn-based multiplayer that includes things like character battles. I've never owned it and couldn't find an image for it, so this crappy picture is all you get. Capcom also published a few other companies' games in Japan. Notable titles include the Japanese version of Tomb Raider 4: The Last Revelation, the first in the series on a Sega console since the original debuted on the Saturn. They also published Sydney 2000, an Olympics-based sports game comprised of multiple events. This one doesn't look so great, and the gameplay doesn't save it. Capcom wasn't just about their own fighting games on the Dreamcast, and showed up to publish Ultimate Fighting Championship in Japan as well. This was the first game I had played about the UFC, and it wasn't half bad at all. No Japanese developer would be complete without a Mahjong game, and Capcom published the Seikiou developed Taisen Net Gimmick Capcom and Psikyo All-Stars. This one features characters from the two companies going head to head in a game of Mahjong, and supported network multiplayer. And with that, we come to the end of the road for Capcom and their brilliant run on Sega's last console. While Sega's and Capcom's relationship was certainly weak in the 8 and 16-bit days, their support of the Saturn and Dreamcast would be an important part of my experience with those two platforms. I mean, I can't even imagine a Dreamcast without their efforts. Whether you were a fighting game fan, a shoot-'em-up fan, or a fan of Resident Evil, Capcom just loaded the system with stuff to play. And the amazing thing is that most of these software releases were literally on top of one another from the moment the Dreamcast came to market. Pretty much every month brought something from Capcom to play, and they stayed the course to the very end. I own damn near every Capcom game released here, and they remain some of my most played to this very day. Sega's final performance was a swan song to remember, a system defined not by its longevity or numbers sold, but by sheer force of quality and value. Capcom made sure its part in that song was loud and clear, and I'll never ever forget its impact. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.